Okay, in this video we're going to be discussing the internet. And to understand the internet, let's take a look at the history of how things got developed. In the early 80s, people started developing, organizations started developing local area networks, right? And these local area networks were privately owned. So larger companies or institutions like universities own these local area networks. So there were local area networks that were developed, right? However, these were not connected, right? So this could what was eventually what happened was that it was thought that why not connect when these local area networks already exist, why can't we connect them together? Why can't we somehow connect these local area networks together? So this interconnectivity because of this interconnectivity, what came into being was what was called an internet, which basically meant what? Interconnected network. Now, if you keep this picture in mind, an internet is a network of networks. It's a way of connecting different networks that are already there, and because of this interconnectivity, this has become one large network that has many networks inside. So you can't say that an internet is a wide area network, because in fact an internet has many wide area networks inside of it. It has many local area networks, it has many wide area networks. So an internet, technically speaking, is much bigger, much more than a wide area network. So let's take a look at the definition of what an internet is. So the internet is a massive network of networks, and it stands for interconnected networks. So early on, this was how the networks were, right? They were separate networks. So this was a separate network, 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 right? And then they thought that we were going to connect them together. And one of the things they did was, instead of developing the entire infrastructure from scratch, they thought, why can't we use something that already exists? Why can't we use the telephone network which was being used at that time for telephone calls, right? Why can't we use this telephone network and transmit our data through this already existing telephone network? So this telephone network basically provided the infrastructure through which the computers here in this local area network, for example, were able to communicate with computers here, right? So this time, through the telephone network, these local area networks were this computer here was able to talk to this computer here, right? Send data to this computer here. So this telephone network basically, the telephone network basically provided the infrastructure or the interconnectivity. Now in old times, what we had was a POTS system, plain old telephone service. Now there was a small problem, and the problem was that in computers all the data was digital, whereas this plain old telephone service was used for carrying data in analog form. So it was carrying analog signals. So what the solution that was thought of was that they were going to connect these computers to modems. And what the modems did was that they converted this digital data that was coming from the computer into analog, and then this analog data was, so this was analog, right, and this here was what? Digital. So digital data from the computer through the modem was converted into analog form, and then it was transmitted over this plain old telephone system, plain old telephone service. And finally at this end, once again we had a modem, and this analog data that was coming from ports was converted into digital by the modem, and then it was given to this computer B. So that's how the transmission took place. If A wanted to send data to B, you needed a modem, because you had a plain old telephone service. So that was the old network, the old telephone network. And now in these days the telephone network has gone digital. So the new telephone network is digital, and these modern phone networks are now called the PSTN, right, the public switched telephone network. They have upgraded from POTS to PSTN, and PSTN is digital. They are using fiber optic cables now, so we don't have a problem now. We don't need to convert this digital data into analog anymore. So we don't need that conversion. So what is the key concept? The key concept is that the telephone networks provide interconnectivity between networks in the internet infrastructure. So they are a very important component through which different networks on the internet are connected with one another. The older telephone networks were analog. The upgraded new telephone networks are digital. The next question is, who owns the internet? And the answer is no one owns the internet. It's not owned by private organization or an individual, not even a country, right? So it is not a private network, rather it is a public network. It is public property, and you can't say that it belongs to a certain organization. It belongs to the public. Okay, so next, what is the role of ISPs in connecting to the internet? What is the role of ISPs in connecting to the internet? Okay, so what if you have a computer at home and you want to connect to the internet? If you want to connect to the internet, you take services of the local ISP. It is also known as the access ISP. So the ISP that provides you with a broadband modem, that runs a cable to your home, right, which is connected to that broadband modem at one end, and the other end, the modem is connected to your computer, right? So the access ISP provides you access to the internet. So you pay money to the access ISP. Now this access ISP is a small company which has a small network, and this company itself is connected to another ISP, which is the regional ISP. Now the regional ISP is a much bigger company. It has a much bigger network. So this access ISP pays money to this regional ISP so that it can connect to the internet. So this regional ISP is much bigger as compared to the access ISP, and this regional ISP in turn pays money to an even bigger company which is called the tier 1 ISP. So this pays money to the tier 1 ISP, right? And the tier 1 ISP is a very, very large organization. It has a very large network, and this tier 1 ISP has national or international coverage, meaning it has such a huge network that it spans the entire country, or maybe beyond country. It can be over several countries also. So that this is the backbone. So tier 1 ISPs are the backbone of the internet. There are many tier 1 ISPs, but if data is to be sent from this tier 1 ISP to this tier 1 ISP, then there are no charges paid here. So tier 1 ISPs don't pay charges to anyone. Rather this ISP and this ISP, and there are many other tier 1 ISPs in the world, they exchange data with each other freely. Okay, so now you can understand that if you have a computer here which is A, and you want to send message to a computer here which is B, your data might flow through this path, right? It will go here, here. That's how the data is going to flow, through this path. So essentially this is the backbone of the internet, and then we have smaller companies that connect to this tier 1 network, and then we have even smaller companies which connect to the regional ISPs, and these companies here are the ones that are giving away connections to customers which are home users, right? Or even businesses or organizations. I hope you understand how this works. So basically our ISPs have a hierarchical structure. There is tier 1 ISP, then tier 2 ISP, then the tier 3 ISPs. Hierarchical structure.